That's before lunch. Okay, that joke didn't go so well. We'll start. Thanks for having us. Hopefully your morning is going well. I know that yesterday we had one conversation on big data. This one is certainly going to head into that space a little bit as well. With me, I have four incredibly talented, distinguished folks. Immediately to my left is Phil Davis, the CEO of Rapleaf. They know a thing or two about data. Next to Phil is Diane Kegley. She is the CMO of Rich Relevance. They do a phenomenal job of understanding things like intent and probability for next product, and they have all sorts of interesting things that they do. Next to Diane is Vijay Lalla. In full disclosure, Vijay and I have two boys that go to school together, so I throw curveball questions at him just for fun. And then last, certainly not least, is Paula Wang, Senior Manager at Cisco Systems. So we've got some really interesting perspectives. We've been talking a lot over the last couple days. I will say my excuse yesterday for why I didn't golf very well at Whistling Straits was not because of operator error. It was because I was tired and I was using rental clubs. My excuse for why I'm only barely capable at moderating is I wasn't originally going to do this. So some of these questions I found quite interesting, and some of them I thought were potential debates rather than stuff we all agree on. I'm hoping we have a little fireworks here. Maybe we'll have some things we disagree on. Please feel free to ask questions. We want to make this as relevant as possible to you, pun intended. We'd like this to be a rich and relevant experience.
Love that.
For all of you. So the first thing I want to talk about is this idea of single view of the customer. And is that fact or fiction? I'll start there and let Phil, I'm just going to let you take a stab at whether you think single view of the customer is truth or fiction, myth or reality.
I think it's a journey and we're only halfway through it, frankly.
Wrong. George,
Okay.
I ask you. Diane, I ask you. No, I'm kidding. I had to try. So we're on a journey.
We're on a journey. And,
go ahead.
And frankly, we need technology to catch up with some of the capabilities that we have in terms of places where we now collect data. So 10 years ago, when people built out technologies and databases and the ability to capture data, they never imagined that social media would provide such a rich universe for marketers. And so we got to let technology catch up to the paradigm shift, and it is, and it will catch up pretty quickly, and it's going to be pretty exciting. But I think we're just on a journey in terms of even collection, let alone using it.
Yep. Diane?
I think it's a third choice, a mandate. I think it's absolutely necessary for marketers to be able to have a really clear perspective of their consumers, and it's not just sales transaction data. It's understanding their intent, their conversations, their perspectives, the things that they care about most, to be able to put together a fabric of who that consumer is, so that this hyper-connected consumer who's looking to connect with brands across multiple channels has the ability to do so in a highly relevant way. The big question is, who owns that data internally, and then B, how do you manifest it into data stores and analytics that you could take real-time action? And I think that's where you're saying we're only somewhat into that journey.
Vijay, I'm going to skip you for a second because I want to ask Paula, from Cisco's point of view, single view of the customer. You've obviously got lots of customers, B2B. Those customers interact with the business through all sorts of various channels. There's a lot of high touch in some of those sales cycles. There's a lot of situations where you've got a lot of very technical people hitting the company on a regular basis because there are all sorts of things they need to know. Is single view of the customer something you can achieve?
I would say a 360-degree view of a customer is what we would like to achieve. I think if you look at the impact of social media on how much we know about customer, it really comes down to a couple of dimensions, right? That's incremental. One is timeliness. It's more and more real time. The second piece is more authenticity. Because of the advent and availability of social media, customers now are finding a way to express more willingly and readily about their attitudes or basically maybe even by intent towards a certain brand. So those are the incremental things that we would like to capture. So in our case, we're trying to capture people's social ID in our traditional CRM system. So as part of our journey on the social CRM, we're also trying to capture potential leads in the social space. So I think it's important to know what we need to know in order to get that prospect, to become a customer of yours. It's not necessarily a single view. I'm not dodging your original question. Some companies are trying to push for this concept, the single source of truth. The reality is there's no single source. The truth changes quite a bit depending on at what stage the customer is in terms of their relationship with the brand. So the point, it all comes down to actionability. We're a very execution-driven, results-driven, outcome-oriented company. So I'm taking a little more time here, but I think it's important to provide a context. So for the very first time in our history, we are signing up as a marketing organization. We are signing up for specific sales goals. We have basically signed up for $1 billion worth of sales qualified leads for the next fiscal year. And we expect that number to grow over the years. So that means any actionable data would be great data. It doesn't matter where it is.
Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, said famously probably 6 or 7 years ago that advertising was the last bastion of unaccountable spend in the enterprise. And so it was partly Google's mission and many of ours to try to make that expenditure somewhat more accountable. It seems like that's certainly becoming the case in Cisco. My belief is very tactically that, and as the strategy guy, I like to talk about tactics, is that today we have this bifurcation going on where a lot of companies have customer databases. They have CRM systems. That has all personally identifiable information in it. There's probably 20, 30 years worth of intellectual property built on top of that to do things like lifetime value models, optimization models, campaign optimization models, et cetera. But it's all got PII in it. And then in the digital world, we've got data in 15 different places. That data needs to be centralized so that you can have, quote, a single view within digital. But then those two systems need to be able to talk to one another because one is purposely designed to have PII and create contactable relationships. The other has to have anonymous data in it, but needs to be able to behave in real time. And so now the question becomes how you get these things to work together. Vijay, in a world where brands start functioning like the NSA and have to have total information awareness of the consumer, what are the real liabilities? What are the challenges that they get stuck with? Because that's a lot of power to yield or to wield.
So other than being introduced as dad of a great kid, I'm actually a partner in a law firm, Davis & Gilbert. We specialize in advertising, marketing, and privacy. So it's a great question. A couple different thoughts for you. One is in terms of having database of aggregate data as well as PII, the first thing I can think of is, yes, you can absolutely match that data. There's nothing from, there's no federal law against that. There's no state laws against that. But, in terms of where you're going to run into more liability, it's more with sensitive data or using data in a way that's materially different from what the consumer expects. So the questions that run through my mind when you ask me that question are, how are you using the data? What kind of data is it? So are you using data related to children? Because then, as of July 1st, there's updates to the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which say persistent identifier data, so photos, audio recordings, more aggregate related data is PII for purposes of consent. And so you need to think about what kind of data you have, how are you securing that data, and what you're doing with it, and if you're communicating to the consumer, what you're doing with it, and it's aligned with what you're actually doing with it. So
All right, so let's get into some different tactics and some different areas. Phil, one of the things we were talking about last night was the idea of first impressions. And one of the challenges that I think brands face is you might have a lot of data on some people, but there might be other people, especially people with whom you're about to create a first impression, you might not know a lot about them. And so what's the, in that conundrum, what do you do? How do first impressions work?
Yeah. So and the reason I think it's important to think about first impressions, when we get up here and we start talking about big data, we all want to talk about the social data, we want to talk about the sexy stuff, but making that actionable is a challenge. And the other thing that's important is, from a marketing perspective, the moment you acquire a customer is the best time to try to engage with that client, give them a good experience, and make money from them. The time after they've opted into your list, they've asked for some information, they made a first purchase, that is the best time to really engage with the customer. And if you don't engage with them at that moment in a great fashion, you're never going to get the relationship kicking off, right? And so we believe that you should really think heavily about, how do you make great first impressions? What do you do well with the real estate that you have in the way you communicate with the customer? So if it's a transactional email, how do you use that real estate really well? And we prescribe to the idea of bringing in data, very simple data, not a lot of fields, just a few fields that you can tie to that individual so that you can, again, begin the process of creating a more relevant and engaging experience with those first early touch points. That'll get you to the bigger touch points. That'll get you to the spot where you can then have a longer term experience with them.
I'm going to let you just go.
Oh, no, I think we're, to key off what you're saying, we're at a point where interruptive marketing is nearing the end. The concept of being able to push messages out to consumers in a way that we've traditionally done is almost past due, right, at this point. And we're moving into a world where consumers are going to be creating a relationship with brands that's based inherently on trust, because the currency is data. And the data that sits between the consumer and the brand, and the ability for that brand to push, instead of advertising, the concept of content, which gives them access to products and services. With that trust, to your point, comes that point where you don't want to violate that trust, because God forbid you do, not only does it become viral very quickly, it ends that relationship with the consumer, and it creates basically a chasm of relevancy. So I think it's absolutely imperative.
Right. So the title of the panel, Can I Help You? Building One True View of the Always-On Customer. So 3 themes in there. One is, can I help you? There's actually a sense of service and a sense of responsibility to provide an experience to the user. Second is One True View. We've talked about that a little bit. And the third is around always-on in real time. I think we'll get to that in a minute. The Can I Help You? You just brought up content. Certainly we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years a rapid rise in the idea of content marketing, stories about brands needing to be publishers. My own company is owned by the Hearst Corporation, large media company, publisher. One of the things that we're seeing, and I have a question about, is there's a line, or maybe there isn't. Again, we'll debate this. Is there or is there not a line? Phil, you're wrong. Before you even open your mouth, I'm just going to tell you you're wrong. Is there a line between content, what used to be called advertorial, now called native ads, and advertising? So if you're a brand and you have a website and somebody comes to that website and you have data about that person, third-party data, maybe you know some interest or intent about that user, and you decide to use your content management system to tailor content. That's targeted content. Then you're also sponsoring native advertising on a publisher site based on the knowledge of the user or the intent or the context. You're going to deliver unique content. Maybe it's branded. And then there's actual advertising. What's the difference between any of these things? Is there one?
Well, I mean, you described a couple different things. So, and I know I'm wrong, but when you talk about an advertising spend and maybe going on and putting a display, and trying to target the best you can only do so much. Again, I'm going to go back to that first impression with a customer you have very little information on, and you're going to still need to spend dollars as an advertiser on traditional display in a way that you're trying to do some targeting. It's a one-to-many message. In other mediums, such as an email, such as phone, such as inside of a chat, you can do one-to-one, and that's where some of the data is powerful. So as an example from a first impression is, there's a lot of travel sites we can all choose to use.
Yep.
And probably many of us are big travelers. We've tried a lot of different ones. And you go in and you put your email in, you get some information. Well, I did one the other day, and the first email I got was rock on in Bangkok. Now, I don't rock on a lot, and I don't go to Bangkok. And and the image was a bunch of 22-year-olds.
You're right about that, Phil.
I know
I just want to tell you you're right about that.
I want to be right finally. But the image is a bunch of 22-year-olds rocking on in Bangkok. Well, I think that the subject line for me might have been better, like, have a classical moment in New York, or enjoy a New York weekend with your wife. They just
I wasn't asking you for your Match.com profile.
It's okay.
That's because long walks in the park. No,
exactly. So it was such a bad first impression.
Yes.
And I said, and I opted out right away. Now they spent money to get me there, and they lost me. Now, if you can improve conversions right away, the trickle effect to your entire brand and marketing campaign is tremendous. That's why I think brand marketers need to think about those first conversions. Because if I can improve that conversion, now I could spend more money for my acquisition. What that might mean is I could push a competitor down in my Google spend because I'm smarter than them, because I could bid higher. The trickle effect increases your scale and your efficiency so much. So that's why I'm pushing back to that one-to-one when we talk about understanding the customer.
Now, sometimes brands that we love, that we think are amazing, that are brilliant at this and do this all the time, and we all like to bring up at conferences, brands like Amazon who've done these things extremely well. When you talk about the idea of can I help you, Amazon as a service brand is a phenomenal story. They bought Zappos, which always says that they're powered by service. It's what they are. Vijay, you saw a tweet yesterday, though. Even the mighty can have a misstep here and there.
Yeah, somebody here actually tweeted out about the Sopranos.
What was it exactly? So here's...
It was a little ode to James Gandolfini passing away, but it was essentially an ad for the DVD sales for Amazon.
So maybe the left hand not knowing what the right hand's doing, where in one case they're trying to produce content that actually is good content in homage to the passing of a really famous actor, and then oops, the personalization engine kicks in and throws DVD ads at you for Sopranos. But Amazon's not always screwing it up. Sometimes they do it very well.
Well, and they've always set the stage and set the bar for brands and retailers to want to try to achieve. They've done such a good job starting with the customer, working their way backwards in terms of how they value products and services. We just completed a launch with L'Oreal of their new North American website. And L'Oreal, aside from having a lot of great content on their website about their products, has a lot of great videos, tips and tricks, celebrity features, seasonal programs, and whatnot. And the problem was that consumers that were going to their site were not being exposed to all of that content. So they relaunched the site using dynamic personalization, and it actually recognizes if I come in, I'm, quasi-blonde and fair-complected, if I'm starting to look at products that attribute me to a particular profile, it's going to give me a very customized website experience. They've taken that one step further, and they're actually moving that capability to the mobile devices. So if later on I'm in Target standing in the L'Oreal aisle, I'm actually going to be able to get a very targeted promotional message or opportunity to be upsold on a particular product. So that's taking it all the way from the website into the in-store environment.
So just to add to that from a legal side, thinking about customers and control and giving customers control, right? So, you talked about native, you talked about control. The way that I see it all implicated from what I deal with on a daily basis is, you're a customer and you're socially engaging with a brand, you're hashtagging a photo on Instagram, your photo's now in an ad on the Facebook page. Did I really consent to that? Did I grant you my, name and likeness to do that? Probably not, because there's nowhere on Instagram to do that. So the question then becomes, was I clear in my disclosures as an advertiser that I was going to do that, right? I'm going to take your photo and I'm going to put an Oreo cookie on top, because Oreo did that during the Super Bowl, and I moderated that for them real time through the Super Bowl to figure out what people were actually doing with their photos and whether they could do things or not. And so that was real-time marketing with a lawyer moderating it because they were using so many
That sounds like an oxymoron. Real-time marketing with a lawyer.
They were using so many landmarks and so many photos that we had to distinguish between what was a real risk and what was not a real risk, right? So there was no, you can't do this. There was, here's a real risk because you can't use the Deftones cover album, but here's not a risk because you can use a St. Louis skyline because we've done it 100 times in 100 different ads. When you take that and then you move it into data, it's the same thing. You want to have control as a consumer over how your data is being used, and when you get into mobile devices and campaigns where you're taking data that you've learned, you're using it real time for mobile, which is great because maybe that's relevant to the consumer. How are you disclosing that to the consumer, right? So the FTC in a recent report said for mobile, you should have just-in-time disclosures. You should have a dashboard that gives consumers more control. And these are all recommendations. A lot of people aren't doing this yet, but that's sort of where the FTC believes things should be headed.
So we're definitely heading into the part of the always-on conversation, and I think the idea of real-time law, which I find fascinating, raises this question, though, of real-time systems versus people. And so it gets into questions about what authority you grant the systems to do things. The Amazon example might be an example of where the systems threw a DVD offer there rather than a human being having the knowledge or the intelligence to. I don't think a human being screwed up and said, let's stick ads at the end of that homage. It was a system.
Algorithm.
Right. Yeah, but where does that line get drawn? And we start to get to the question of what roles do humans play in that mix? Are there new roles emerging? We were talking earlier on the panel that there are some conferences now that are really trying to invite both the CMO and the CIO, the idea of the chief marketing technologist, that there's a lot of blur going on there. Vijay, I think the idea of having legal counsel on Super Bowl Sunday in real time monitoring and saying yes, no, sort of reminds me of Good Morning Vietnam, where they're deciding in real time whether that piece of news can go out or not. That's new.
I think what the FTC and what people are talking about a lot is privacy by design, right? Building privacy into your products at the beginning versus at the end when you're dealing with the Attorney General or the FTC investigating you, which is not where you want to be. So how do you do that? I guess it's sort of having these conversations, and it's not just having the CIO and the CMO together. It's first having basic conversations like whose data is it? Who owns the data? Who's using the data and how are they using it? Whose privacy policy applies? You wouldn't believe the conversations I have where I'm on the phone with the agency, the brand, and the vendor, and I say, whose privacy policy applies? Isn't it the brand's? Isn't the brand going to ultimately use the data? And the prize vendor says, well, no, it's our policy. And I say, well, your policy says you follow the client's policy. And the lawyer says, well, that's not really what it means. I said, okay, well, I'm gonna contractually rely on that and sue you if something goes wrong, but that's what it says. So regardless of what the policy says, what are we actually doing? And those are the questions that we ask. What's actually happening with the data? Who owns it? And I think Paula might have a good perspective on sort of that convergence of marketing and IT as well.
Yeah, I'm not a legal expert, and I don't think that's the reason why I'm invited here. So I'm going to switch back to your original question around content. Content, we have been doing essentially content marketing from the very beginning of marketing, right? But from a Cisco perspective, let me just share with you a real case of how we are doing essentially digital marketing, social marketing, real-time marketing, all these things, data-driven marketing. So I hope this would be of some help to some of you here. So essentially, whether we drive the traffic to our site via search, advertising, or the visitor just stumbles upon our site, right? Regardless where the drive to may come from, the Cisco.com site, the property represents a huge gold mine for us. Every day, we have 10 million visitors. And not all of them have, of course, trackable cookies. Some of them, may delete that. But since 2006, we've been actually scoring these cookies. So 85% of the people who come to our site actually are anonymous because we're B2B. We don't always, require them to provide their, contact information. So 15% are known visitors. So how do we, given all that, how do we still make use of the data? So since 2006, we've been tracking what we call TIS, topic interest scores. So each of the cookie actually has 75 or so scores associated with it, which speaks to their interest in different products, in different topics, segments, or even verticals or other things. But by the time, sometime in 2009, we realized, we probably have a way to track their purchase intent as well. So in addition to what their interests are, we should be able to find out whether they're ready to buy or not by certain revelation incidents. For example, if they spent a lot of time looking at product comparison charts, they're doing something. They're looking at different products to solve a specific business problem. If they are reading or viewing your video on price sheets, they're onto something. So those type of incidents, we call them revelation incidents. We factor those into our second system, which basically is eventually produced the score called engagement scoring. So today, every night, 5 million cookies get recalculated with a number of scores, including both the topic interest scores and the engagement scores. So we do a lot of fun things with these contacts. So basically, if they have been clicking on, for example, security-related web pages, or if they have been doing in-page search on security, they're in the market, for security products. You could, basically pop up security-related white papers, or videos, or offers. So the offers really come in when the engagement scoring goes up. We actually, for each of the products we have a certain threshold. So for example, for wireless, once they reach 50, a score of 50, we will use the test and target, the Adobe Marketing Cloud product to basically serve up the right or relevant offers. So that's, the content marketing basically how content marketing has been evolving for us, right? From day one, it was, it has been about relevancy, and now it just, it's relevant in real time. Yep. So I think that level of detail speaks back to the point these guys were talking about. Today's CMO or average marketing manager like me, we can no longer just be the creative person, who is good with copywriting or coming out with good ideas. We have to equip ourselves with analytical skills. So certainly at a decision-making level, the CMOs, their profile is shifting. They have to. They need to understand, how technology can enable all these things. So literally, in our world, you guys are all sitting in this room. In the online world, you are all 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1 to us, right?
You're all ones to me. I just want to be clear. None of you are zeros. None of you are zeros.
But that's the that's the computing knowledge. That's data, right? So the value of data is really in getting us the insights about you, wherever you are, and also the timing.
So I played golf yesterday, and one of the people I played with was under 30. I'm not sure how many here are, but between the mad men and the math men, I think,
or women.
Sure. Well, what we're going to end up with is mad science, which is sort of the combination, and I think we're going to see these X-men or X-women hybrids, people that are growing up out of the millennials that are going to be incredibly skilled both on the creative side as well as on the math side. Let me just shift gears a little bit from that, because I think that was a great case study of data in practice to make the marketing journey work better for the customer. We did have this notion that we were talking about around loyalty. So a little further down the chain, loyalty historically in our world is thought of in terms of how loyal we are to brands. Why isn't it the other way? And why isn't it about how loyal brands are to us? So if we flip that around, the question that Vijay was raising about who owns the data, well, a lot of the data is the customer's data. It belongs to the customer because it's their actions, the intent they're expressing. When I search for things in Google, I'm expressing intent. Google owns that search intent data, but it's my intent data. So let me come back, Phil, to you and to Diane and talk a little bit about that idea of the data and how that data is used and how we could sort of reverse that idea of loyalty.
Sure. Well, I think simply, if you want to reverse that idea, I think about privacy is going to shift from this a legal definition, because it's very hard to define all of this from a legal perspective. Right. So I think it's going to shift, and as a brand marketer, you need to think about your what's your brand commitment? What is your promise back to your customers? What do you stand for? And some brand promises are around product freshness, product excellence, family fun, safety, whatever it is. But part of that brand message, especially if you do a lot of your work online, is going to have to include a statement of how we also are committed to our customers and how we use their data. And so, you always fall back. It's transparency. It's giving people notice and also giving them choices.
Yep. Diane?
2 points to that. The first is that the CEO of a major hardware retailer who we're working to build an in-store network with right now has said once, he goes, I know what my customer's doing on their tablet, on their laptop, on their mobile device, but the minute they walk into my store, I lose them, which is amazing. In my own retail environment, I lose them because I lose that connectivity. And so this whole concept of in-store Wi-Fi and pushing to mobile devices while consumers are shopping is becoming a white-hot topic. And it really goes back to how do you respect that consumer in that experience without being wholly interruptive, but being complementary and relevant. So a lot of it is simply through gateways, if you will, offering opt-ins, offering them the ability to get out of it. If you visit any website now in the UK or the EU, you're given very clearly this cookie line that you can opt in or out of being tracked. And I think the more transparent we can be with consumers about the way that we're using their data, about the intent to make it a more valuable, robust shopping experience is critical.
Just add one quick thing to that. So just flipping back to native first. It's my phone. There that goes. Hopefully that didn't break. Flipping back to native for a second. You're thinking about. I heard someone in the hallway, and you may be in the room, but talking about native and saying, well, it's not really an ad, right? And so that's not really transparent to me in terms of where I think the marketing industry needs to head. Now, when you look at the FTC, yes, they issue guidance about notice and transparency and choice, but do not track hasn't happened. They're really leaving it at this point to the marketers to kind of figure this out. Where you see enforcement is really, okay, I was just served a gluten-free ad because I'm gluten-free, but did an insurer just look at that and not give me a disability policy? Did it affect my ability to get credit? That's where the FTC is enforcing things, right? Path settled with the FTC for $800,000 because Path was taking address book information and wasn't clear about that. And so the enforcement side isn't really focused on sort of just relevancy, right? So it's sort of that giving that choice is really going to be up to the marketers.
Okay, we got about 10 minutes left. Questions, we're happy to start taking them. We've got more we can throw at the group, but if there's some coming from, are you taking naps? You better not be taking naps out there. Do we have any questions right out of the gate? Vijay will offer free legal advice for at least the next 5 minutes. Anyone?
Yep. Okay.
All right, we're going to keep going then. I wanted to come back to that sense of, so I'll throw this out there based on absolutely no data, which is at an event not long ago, I had someone from Google use the phrase constant consideration, that consumers are now in the state of constant consideration, aka brand loyalty is dead, and I'm always ready to skip on to the next provider for whatever motivation, whether that's price, satisfaction, product quality, whatever. And I would argue that we're so deluged with stuff that we actually want to cling to some brands, and we want to cling to them irrationally, devoutly, with tons of loyalty. We're willing to give them all the information they want about us in exchange for wonderful moments and experiences. Do we think that's true? And sort of where's the line where it's okay to, how much data is enough? How much data is enough?
I actually have an interesting factoid for that. Because we're embedded across major retail sites, we can see and aggregate what's happening across CPG, health and beauty, consumer electronics, and our analytics team analyzes and categorizes that information, and we basically look at a brand health index for the different brands that we work with. And what you find is that we all know that online influences offline, and the path to purchase starts online, if there is even a path to purchase anymore. But the fact of the matter is that what might be popular on a store aisle shelf is not as popular online. And in fact, on any given day, more than 50% of all products, but most products go unseen online, and we call that a dark aisle. It'd be like if you're walking into a Kroger and certain aisles are just not even illuminated. And this is a major problem for brands, because being there at that moment where consumers, and this is that constant consideration, are starting that path to purchase online, are planning their shopping journeys, brand marketers really have to think about the whole evergreen nature of their marketing campaigns across these different channels. And how do you stay persistent and not go broke with your budget? How do you do that and use the leverage that you have with your retail partners to gain those types of insights? So you better know when to be marketing up and down, and in terms of, from the online component to into the store. I think this is about respecting that consumer's journey the entire way.
So how many people have purchased a product on Amazon? I just wanted to get you all to raise your hands. Thank you. How many of you have gone to Amazon without an intent to purchase a specific product, to browse? Yes? Really? Has anyone... Tell me how that experience has worked for you. Somebody can. Yes. Somebody tell me. Somebody... You go... is there anyone that does this regularly?
They have 10 years of my buying history. When I go to Amazon, they're showing me online all the stuff that I didn't even know had come out yet.
Right. So when you go, you're talking about going to Amazon.com, and then because the content that's presented to you is already tailored enough right there that's a good experience.
Exactly.
Also, if I may say...
And you're happy that they have total information knowledge of all your purchases because they deliver an experience that is relevant to you.
I wish most of the retailers I went to had that depth of knowledge, but used it as well. There were a lot of retailers that do have that depth of knowledge that don't use it that well.
Yep. Okay, because I think that notion of the dark aisle is a fascinating one. Because there are experiences digitally where you go in and you browse, or you go in top down. There are other experiences radically different than that. So YouTube, very few people go to YouTube and start navigating down to look at content. Usually you get a link from someone, you come into YouTube sideways, and then through targeting of other relevant video, you then make your way across other parts.
I mean, before the days of personalization, the way you navigate is search, right? You go through the nav bar, or perhaps you're given recommendations that some merchandiser thinks is relevant for that category that's hardwired. Yeah. It's not dynamic enough. So.
Yeah. Okay, questions? Yep.
Hi, Jarvis Mack, Rocket Fuel. I had a question for Paula. You were talking about the cookie-based scoring and how you're taking those scores and you're using test and target to personalize the content around messaging that they would see on the site. How do you take that from within your own properties and go out in terms of outbound marketing to based on the score that you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do two types of engagements with our customers. One is always on. Always on, the platforms are primarily our own site, Cisco.com, across the globe, and also some of our social sites. We do have our own online communities in some countries, and also we have certain pages on Facebook and the Twitter platform. So in that case, it's pretty clear, right? We do, on our site, we do test and target, even when they are anonymous to us. On other platforms, we leverage social listening real time to identify opportunities. On a previous, one of the previous panels, people talked a lot about why real-time marketing. In my mind, real-time marketing helps us identify the opportunities and really jump on it. The first opportunity possible. So. A second case for us in terms of social listening is also a crisis management. So in some countries, some of our competitors are, because not every country has a legal system like the US, so some of the competitive environment can be really harsh. So we need to keep an eye on the competitor's voice towards us to be able to respond first, real time. The second type of campaign, in addition to always on, we are still doing other types of nurturing campaigns and try to convert them into leads. The way we do it, we still leverage engagement scoring. We do in-campaign engagement scoring. So once we get a contact or some level of information, possibly first impression somewhere, we will, they will immediately get a welcome letter from us. So, and in that letter, we will try to kind of test, what their interest areas may be. So we list a bunch of things. Depending on where they click, we kind of know what the next steps could be. And then we leverage our own video platform. We have a Cisco Interaction Network. We have tons of self-produced, we have a studio. We produce lots of thought leadership and educational video pieces. So we design lots of different scenarios for the nurturing journey. It's a combination of email, video, events, and other type of things. Throughout that process, we score them. Literally towards the end, possibly they get a 10 and what have you. Our sales people, either an inside sales rep will call them, or the feet on the street will knock on their door. So those are the two types of marketing we're doing in order to engage with our, market essentially. Hopefully that answered. Thank you.
30-second shameless. We're going to come right to that. I just want 30-second shameless promotion is what you should also do is have a DMP, a data management platform, because any first-party data that you collect about users, that first-party data should be should be something you should be able to use to build segments, to create unique groups that you're going to market to, and then you should very easily be able to push that intelligence, that cookie pool, out to various platforms to go and buy advertising. So for example, you should be able to have people come to the website, express interest by viewing content. You should be able to put those people into a certain segment, and then you should be able to push that out to a DSP to be able to buy real-time impressions against it. That's what remarketing is. That's one of the ways that I think you take first-party data that you're collecting and scores and engagement scores, and then use that to go out into the world to make the advertising work better. That was shameless. Yep. One question.
So if you were to do a one true view of me, you might think I was a Rihanna fan and liked My Little Pony, but the problem is my wife uses my Spotify account and my kid uses my Netflix.
Yep.
So when you
So you want to talk about how screwed we are?
All right. Well, that's the story I'm sticking to. So.
Right.
Right. So how are you all?
So Paris for you is not the city. Is that what you're saying? Anyway.
So how do you all tackle that? Of you're starting to get this, the accounts are just a part of our everyday life that we share as a part of our family.
Yeah.
How do you tackle that?
So is this only a technical challenge, or is it more than a technical challenge? The idea of having multiple people on the same device or the same person on multiple devices, it's obviously something that challenges us.
Can I quickly address that very quickly? We're in B2B, so I think the possibility for your kids to go visit Cisco.com site is very slight. So I guess my point is we probably, we are aware people are multi-screen, so we are trying to figure out how to gain visibility into their identity.
But you're Cisco, you manage the routers, you should be able to fix all this.
But there are the lawyers around us.
Yeah, right.
I'm not your lawyer.
There's a legal system. So I think for us, probably we're somewhat blessed in that we don't deal with the multiple people using or accessing our web property. But
yep.
Yeah.
Phil, you were going to.
Well, and what's fascinating, so absolutely that's a challenge, right? And it's a challenge that's changing with mobile because devices are becoming, synonymous with the individual more and more. and we'll see that change. However, I think what's important is whether it's someone's shared behavior, we also have behavior that goes outside of our core. So every Christmas, the weeks before, we all buy things that have nothing to do with ourselves. And so how do marketers understand that behavior? And really, that's where demographic data becomes very important, because it helps put context behind a behavior, behind a purchase. And I think it's really important that that's where we go back to the theme of the whole panel, which was the complete view of the customer. So looking at a purchase does not give you a complete view. Putting context around it, putting demographic information and other behaviors around an incident helps give you a much better view of that customer and greater understanding.
Super. I was going to say we're at the time, but Steve, we can take one more? We'll take that question.
All right, so I'll steer this a little differently. Tim Letcher from Cole McVoy. And a lot of what we talk about when we're all this cookie dropping and sharing of information and tracking and all that, it's really based on this compact we have with people, and there's a lot of trust involved, and it's going to be like the no follow and a lot of arms race things going on, as far as no follow, I'm going to follow you, and what information I'm willing to share. And I listened to this discussion earlier this week about the NSA and FBI, and somebody brought up the point, is like, what if we, made it a transactional thing where you did microtransactions where people actually made money by sharing their information? You see some brands do it with like deals and Foursquare check-ins, but
yeah, I'll tell you, it's a great question, and I know personally every time I get into this conversation, there's a group out of Yale that has this idea of what they call VRM, which is vendor relationship management. It flips the whole idea of CRM on its head, and it suggests that you as a user should control and manage all of your own data and set your own personal rules for which vendors you're going to allow to have what data. The problem is, who's building that platform? There's no nonprofit that's pulled that off yet. And so the question of our identities and our preferences and our data, I think mainly digitally live in only a handful of companies' databases. And those are a lot of the companies that seem to have been getting subpoenas from the NSA over the last few years. Vijay, I don't know if it's a question for you, but that idea of the user owning their own data, do we own our own data?
Since we're out of time, I'm going to be short. No.
Thank you, Joe Biden, for answering that question. We don't.
I don't think so. I don't think users are close to having the level of control that I think the FCC would like them to have over that. In terms of the guidance that you're seeing, it's exactly what we're talking about. When we talked about mobile, we're talking about dashboard control, being able to go in and fix your data, right? And then there's for the marketers on the panel, there's the monetary aspect of it, right? So I traded data for free Wi-Fi at a hotel recently. I was very comfortable with that transaction. So.
Yeah.
Right. It's the currency is service today.
I think that's right. All right, great. Thank you very, very much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks very much, guys. We're going to segue into from this discussion of the One True Consumer to looking at the implications of everything we've been talking about all morning on the creation.